Welcome to class today. Today, let's look at the biology practicals for the NECO exam. We are going to look at the specimens that will come out in the exams, and questions will be asked from this or on these specimens. And so I will be taking some of them and I will try to simplify them for you so that you don't need to cram to go into the examination hall. All right, you just need to have certain information, and once you have those information, you will be able to answer your questions comfortably and confidently in the exams, and you can be sure that you will come out with a very excellent result. Mind you, the practical carries the larger part of the entire mark. So if you do well in your practicals, then you're on your way to doing well in the exam itself. So pay attention to what we're going to do today, and you will get the best from it. Now, some of the specimens you have here, you have the pelvic girdle of rabbit or a mammal. So I will not be telling you this is specimen this, specimen that. When you see it on the table, you should be able to identify that, okay, this is this, this is that, this is that. So you have the pelvic girdle of rabbits, the cervical or cervical vertebra, the caudal vertebra, the transverse section of guava fruit, the transverse section of pawpaw fruit, quail feather, agama lizard, quadrat, the sweeping net, housefly, pride of Barbados fruit, cashew nut, millipede, crab, and sorghum grain. So there are some of these that I'll quickly talk about. I don't intend to make this video too long, so I'll just go straight to the point. Let's start with the pelvic girdle of rabbit. So when we talk about the pelvic girdle of rabbit, what are the likely questions they can ask you here? Now, number one, this question is actually coming from the skeletal system, the topic called the skeletal system. And so there are about 3 bones that you have in the specimen: the pelvic girdle of rabbits, the cervical vertebra, the caudal vertebra. So I'll quickly take a little time to talk about the skeletal system in mammals. All right. Now, number one, the skeletal system. The skeleton is the bony framework of the body of man or mammal. All right. And one of the functions of the skeleton is it gives rigidity, it gives support. All right. It gives support to the body. It gives the shape. All right. And it helps with locomotion, amongst other things. But those are not the things we're going to be talking about today. Now, in the body of mammals, all the bones that make up the skeleton of mammals are divided into 2 parts. So there are the 2 parts of the skeleton. So that's the first question you could be asked. So you have 2 parts of mammalian skeleton. Mammalian skeleton. And what are those 2 parts? You have the axial skeleton, and then we have the appendicular skeleton. Appendicular skeleton. I hope you are following. What makes up the axial skeleton? We have the skull, the vertebral column, which is also called the backbone. You have the ribs, you have the sternum, or the breastbone. So another name for the sternum is the breastbone. Okay. Now, why do you need to understand this? They can ask you that this pelvic girdle or the cervical vertebrae or the caudal vertebrae, what parts of the skeleton or of the human skeleton, what part is it or does it belong to? So the pelvic girdle belongs to the appendicular skeleton. So we are coming there. So under this axial skeleton, we have the skull, the vertebral column, and part of the vertebral column is the cervical and the caudal. I'm still coming there. So for the axial skeleton, you have that. Then for the appendicular skeleton refers to the girdles and the limbs. Now, when we talk about the girdles, there are 2 major girdles in the body of mammals. The upper girdle, which is called the pectoral girdle. The pectoral girdle, and then you have the girdle of the lower limbs, which is called the pelvic girdle. So let me quickly give you an hint here that you can use to remember which is the pectoral, which is the pelvic. Now there's a particular part, there is a bone in the female reproductive part, all right, that has to open up for a baby to come out during reproduction. When a baby is about to be born, you call it the pelvis. So that is where the name pelvic comes from. So the pelvis, the pelvic girdle. So the pelvic girdle is actually the girdle of the lower limbs. All right, this is the girdle, the pelvic girdle, while this part is the pectoral girdle. So what are the bones of the pectoral girdle? What are the bones of the pelvic girdle? We'll talk about them in a moment. Why do we need to talk about them? Because they can ask you to draw this pelvic girdle and list the bones that make up the pelvic girdle. You draw and then you label it accordingly. Now, a part of the appendicular skeleton, we have the limbs. And under the limbs, you have the forelimbs, and the hind limbs. Not hind limb, hind limbs, from the word behind, before, behind. So the forelimbs, the hind limbs. So the forelimbs talks about the limbs, the upper part, the upper limb, or the hands. So for mammals, for humans, for example, because you are standing erect, Homo erectus, your hands are not on the ground. But if you look at rabbits, they are bent. Okay, so their forelimbs are on the ground, then their hind limbs are also on the ground. Okay, so the one in the front, that is the forelimbs, the one at the back is the hind limb. So the limbs and the girdles, they make up the appendicular skeleton. Therefore, this pelvic girdle makes up part of the appendicular skeleton. It's a girdle. Now, let us break this down. All right, let's break this down. So the pectoral, so let's start with the pelvic girdle, since this is what we have in our practical. So there are 3 bones that make up the pelvic girdle, and those 3 bones, I'm going to give you an acronym for it. The acronym is PII. What is PII? The pelvic girdle is made up of bones which are the pubis, the ilium, and the ischium. So these are the 3 bones that make up the pelvic girdle: the pubis, the ilium, the ischium. While the bones that make up the pectoral girdle, you remember I said the pectoral girdle, that's the upper limb girdle, the girdle of the upper limb. There are also 3 bones there. You have the scapula, which is also called the shoulder blade. You have the clavicle, which is also called the collarbone, and then you have the coracoid. So these are the 3 bones. So the acronym here is SCC. Okay, while the acronym here is PII. But this is what the emphasis is on for your practicals, for your specimen. But when you enter for your essay and your objective, all right, they could ask you other questions on this skeletal system. So take note again, the girdles forms part of the appendicular skeleton. Okay, and the appendicular skeleton is made of the girdles, the limbs. The girdles are the pectoral girdle, which is the upper limb girdle. Then the pelvic is the lower limb girdle. All right. Then you have the forelimbs, which is the hands, the hind limbs, which are the legs. Now, in mammals, let me quickly tell you the bones of the forelimbs. What are the bones that make up the forelimbs? Your hand. H for hand. So the first bone in this in the hand is H for humerus. So the first bone here is humerus. Humerus is the bone, this one that is connected to your shoulder. That is your humerus. And then you have two bones here, which is the ulna and the radius. The ulna and the radius. So what makes up the four limbs is the humerus, the ulna, and the radius. Those are the three major bones. And then there are other smaller bones, the carpals, the metacarpals, the phalanges. So the carpals from your wrist, okay, the carpals, the metacarpals, then the phalanges. Now it's important to note that the way the four limbs are designed, the way your upper limb is designed, that's almost similar to the way your lower limbs are designed. The number of bones you have in the pectoral girdle is what you have, the same number you have in the pelvic girdle. The number of bones you have in the forelimb is what you have in the hind limb. So for the hind limb, you have the first bone here is the femur. The femur. And this femur is regarded as the longest bone in the body. It's the longest bone, and it's also regarded as the strongest bone as well, the femur. All right. While down here after the femur, okay, after just the kneecap, you have the tibia and the fibula. The one at the front, there is a flat bone in front of your leg here. That is the tibia, and then behind it is the fibula. All right. So after this femur, you have the tibia, and then there is the fibula. All right. So the bones of the hind limbs are femur, tibia, fibula. For the four limbs, humerus, ulna, radius. And I told you, in addition to these four limbs, you have the carpals, the metacarpals, the phalanges. In addition to these hind limbs, you have the tarsals. So the tarsals, the metatarsals, and the phalanges. Okay, so that makes up the bones of the appendicular skeleton. So now, for us to talk about the cervical vertebra and the caudal vertebra, I'm going to be talking about the axial skeleton, which is the first part of the mammalian skeleton. Let's talk about the second one. We have the cervical vertebra and the caudal vertebra. So the axial skeleton, which is the first part of the mammalian skeleton, remember I told you, you have the axial skeleton and the appendicular. Those are the two parts. So the axial skeleton I've listed is made up of the skull, the vertebral column. But that vertebral column, which is also called the backbone, is made up of 5 bones. 5 different types of bones make up the vertebral column. So we are going to look at the bone and the region of the body where it is found, so that you will be able to answer questions on this, because they could ask you, where is it found? What type of bone or what part of the skeletal system does it belong to? What is the function? So let's talk about the bones and then the region or the location in the vertebral column. So the 5 of them, the first one is the cervical. The cervical vertebrae. Instead of bones, let me write vertebrae, type of vertebrae, then the location. The cervical vertebrae. The cervical vertebrae is the first in the entire backbone. Is the first type of bone. Is found in the neck region. The neck region. And this cervical is divided into 2. You have the first one is the atlas, and the second one is the axis. So the atlas and the axis make up the cervical vertebrae. The atlas is used for nodding. It allows you to nod. Okay, to nod. So when you nod like this, it is because of the atlas. And when your axis allows you to look sideways. All right. So axis allows to look sideways. So they can ask you the function of the cervical vertebrae. So the atlas is the first bone in that vertebral column. The second one is the axis, and then you now have the other ones that are listed. All right. So the second one is the thoracic vertebra. The thoracic vertebra. The thoracic is found in the chest region. The chest region. All right. And that's where, so chest region here, but at the back, you remember we are talking about the backbones. So the bones at the back that connect to the chest region, that is the thoracic, and of course it makes up the thoracic cavity as well. The thoracic cavity includes your rib cage, the sternum, which is the breastbone, which is in between the ribs. Okay, all right. And then the third one is the lumbar. The lumbar, the location is the upper abdomen. Upper abdomen. Then we have the sacral. The sacral is the lower abdomen. And then you have the cauda or the caudal. The caudal is the tail region. Please note what now this rabbit is just a representation of the mammals. It's just an example. So it's just giving an example of other mammals. So the same thing also applies to humans. They're also mammals. The only difference is that the number for each of these bones may vary, because rabbits, they have a long tail, but for humans you can't see the tail, even though the caudal bones are found in humans, but it is not visible. All right, so it is actually a vestigial organ. That's why you can't see it. Vestigial organs, they are reduced because they have not been in use over time. All right, so you have that. So when they ask you cervical vertebrae, it is part of the axial skeleton. The cervical vertebrae, okay, is part of the axial skeleton. The caudal is the tail region. Cervical is the neck region. So they can ask you the location. Then under the cervical, they can ask you to list the two bones that make up the cervical and what is their function. Is that okay? Then of course they can ask you what's the number of bones that make up the caudal, and then the cervical, the atlas, and the axis. Now I haven't done that. Let us go quickly now. We're going to be looking at the animals that we have here. The agama lizard, the housefly, the millipede, the crab. What are the differences? What are the similarities between them? Let's look at that. Specimens we'll be talking about agama lizard, housefly, millipede, and crab. So there are questions they can ask you. One of the questions they can ask you, that you should classify the animals to the class level. So you will be expected to tell the kingdom they belong to. Is it kingdom Plantae or Animalia or whatever kingdom? What kingdom does it belong to? What phylum does it belong to? And what class? So I'll quickly do that for you right now. You remember the kingdoms, the different kingdoms for animal kingdom. Sorry, there are 5 kingdoms rather. Okay, so you have the kingdom Monera, which are the bacteria. You have the kingdom Protoctista. You have which are the algae. All right. You have the kingdom Fungi. Okay. You have the kingdom Plantae, and then you have the kingdom Animalia. So, but all of these are all in the kingdom Animalia. They are in the animal kingdom. So I've done it in a tabular form. They are all animal kingdom. So I'm going to write kingdom here is Animalia. Please note, not kingdom animals. It's Animalia. 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 So they can ask you the similarity. The similarity is number 1, they are all in the kingdom Animalia. Or they can say the similarity between these two. They are all kingdom Animalia. Now, then what are the phyla? The different phyla in the animal kingdom. You have the poriferans, which are examples of sponges. You have protozoans, amoeba, euglena. They are all examples of protozoans, paramecium, plasmodium. You have the coelentrates, coelenterata, which you have where you have Hydra, Aurelia, Lobelia. All right. You have the platyhelminthes, which are the flatworms. The platyhelminthes are the flatworms. You have the nematoda. Okay. You have the annelida. The nematoda are parasitic worms. The annelida are segmented worms. All right. And then you have the mollusca. All right. And if we look at the board, we actually have the mollusca. So we have the mollusca. Okay, under the mollusca, that is where you have the snails. You have the periwinkles, octopus. All right, organisms that have scales or shells rather on their body. All right, they are the molluscs. And then you have the arthropoda. So on the board we have arthropods. So so the phylum that housefly and millipede belong, they belong to the arthropoda. So phylum arthropoda. Arthropoda. And what's the meaning of arthropoda? Arthropoda means jointed appendages. Poda is legs. So their legs are jointed together, or the appendages are jointed. That's the meaning of jointed appendages. So you have, for the housefly, the arthropods. All of them are in the kingdom Animalia. Now, what phylum do they belong to? So we are going to look at the different phyla that we have under the kingdom Animalia. But before we do that, so housefly, it belongs to the phylum Arthropoda. Arthropoda. Millipede belongs to phylum Arthropoda. Crab belongs to phylum Arthropoda. They are all arthropods. Now, I'm going to explain that to you. Arthropod means arthro, means jointed. Poda means legs or appendages. So arthropoda means jointed appendages. So the phylum Arthropoda, okay, has 4 major classes. And those classes, okay, I have an acronym for them, MICA, that you can use to remember. MICA, because you are going to use them to answer these classes now. MICA. The first one is Myriapoda. Myriapoda, e.g. What's the meaning of Myriapoda? Myria is from the word myriads. Myriads means many. So if I say there are myriads of opportunities, it means there are many opportunities. So if I say Myriapoda, it means many legs. So organisms that have many legs, examples are centipede and millipedes. So centipede and millipedes are examples of Myriapoda. All right. So for the class, for millipede, it belongs to the class Myriapoda. Many legs. Now the next one is insecta. I for insecta. And what's insecta? Insecta are the true insects. They have wings. These myriapods, they don't have wings. They are wingless, so they are not true insects. But this insecta, they are true insects. They have wings. Example, you have your cockroach, housefly, butterfly, okay, butterfly, bees, etc. They have wings. So that is where housefly belongs to. They are insecta. So they can ask you what are the observable differences between the two. One observable difference is this one has wings, this one does not have wings. All right, let's talk about the C, crustacea. The C is crustacea, C-R-U, crustacea. What are crustaceans? Crustaceans are the aquatic arthropods. They are organisms that reside in water. They are those arthropods in water. Example of crustaceans like your crayfish, like your crab, prawn, shrimps, etc., lobsters. All right, so and we have crab here. So crab is an arthropoda, but is a crustacea. Crustacea, that is the class it belongs to. So can you see, they are all arthropods, they are all animalia. These three are arthropoda, but they are not in the same class. So they can now ask you what are the observable differences between them. So, and the last one is arachnida. Arachnida, example of arachnida are the scorpions, the termites, and your spider. Those are examples of arachnida. So these are the 4 classes that make up the arthropoda. I haven't done that. Before we go to a gamma lizard, they can now ask you what are the observable differences between them. Okay, so when you observe, number 1, for insecta, they have wings. All right, the insecta is divided, they have 3 body parts: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. So I'll quickly write a little differences between these 3 groups. All right, these 3 classes. Before that, let me just fill in this. The phylum that lizard belongs to is the phylum Chordata. Because after the arthropoda, you have the echinodermata, where you have the sea urchins, the sea cucumber. Then after the echinodermata, you have the chordata. The chordates are the vertebrate animals. They are vertebrates. They have the backbone. That is where lizard belongs to. And the chordates, they have 5 classes. So I will talk about the 5 classes, but let me quickly differentiate between these very quickly, and then we go to the classes for the chordata. Poda, insecta, crustacean. Then let's even add the arachnid, but because arachnida is not in this, so it doesn't confuse you. So let's talk about these 3. Some of their differences. Now, body segments. For insecta, they have 3 body segments: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. So they have 3, which is the head, the thorax, the abdomen. Now for this insecta, their thorax is divided into 3. You have the prothorax, the mesothorax is at the middle, then the metathorax. And these 3 segments of the thorax, they have legs attached to the 3, and therefore they have 3 pairs of legs. So that's another thing. That's another observable difference. So legs, for this insecta, they have 3 pairs of legs. 3 pairs. So each of the segments of their thorax has a pair of legs. That is 6 legs. 3 pairs of legs. Now, if you look at the crustacea, their body is divided into 2 parts, which is instead of the head, it is called the cephalothorax. Cephalo is from the word head. So you will see that their head is maxed, is jointed, is connected to their neck. So both are connected together. That's why it's called cephalothorax. If you check crayfish, you see that is true. Cephalothorax, and then you have the abdomen. So they have 2 body segments. For the insecta, they have 3 pairs of legs. All right. And before we conclude the other ones, let's talk about wings. For wings, for this insecta, they have wings. So wings are present. So presence of wings, present. And they actually have 2 pairs of wings. 2 out of the 3 regions of the thoracic cavity, 2 of them have wings, while the 3 have legs. So wings are present. For Myriapoda, wings are absence of wings. For Crustacea, wings are absent. And so the last thing I'll talk about is the number of legs for Myriapoda and the number of legs for Crustacea. Legs, the crustaceans, they have 5 pairs of legs. 5 pairs of legs. While for the Myriapoda, we said myriad, many. So they have many legs. So you can say hundreds or thousands of legs. And because we are dealing with millipedes, so hundreds, thousands, many. Either you write thousands or you write many, you are covered. So these are some of the observable differences. And of course, the eye. Do they have the eyeball or not? For the insecta, the eyeball is present. For the crustacea, they just have a dot. They don't have the eyeball. And that dot is the ocelli. They have the ocelli, right? Or eye spot. All right. And for the myriapod, they also have a sensitive organ, not the compound eye like the insecta. The compound eye is what they have in the insect, the big eye. They have eye present as well. All right. Let's talk about the class that the Agama lizard belongs to. So for the phylum Chordata, there are 5 classes in that Chordata. So phylum Chordata, They have the following classes. Pisces. Pisces are the fishes. Then you have the amphibia, which are the frog and toads. Frog, toads, salamander, newts, etc. Then you have the reptiles. Reptiles, that is where you have lizard, you have snakes. So your gamma lizard is a reptile. Lizard, snake, crocodile, alligator, etc. They are reptiles, turtle. Then you have the aves. The aves are the birds. And then we have the mammals, which is where the rabbits belongs to. Mammals are the animals that can reproduce their young ones alive, e.g. rabbits. All right, so, but we're talking about lizard. They belong to the reptiles. So they belong to class Reptilia. Amphibia, reptilia, not reptiles. Reptilia. Okay. Aves, mammalia, not mammals, mammalia. Okay, so that those are the classes. So it belongs to class Reptilia. And I believe you have understood all that we have discussed so far. Next, we are moving to the other specimens. So as not to make this video too long, I will just talk about the quadrat and the sweeping net. Okay, so the quadrat and the sweeping net. So they can ask you to write the differences, the similarities. One of the similarities is that both of them are ecological tools. They are used in the ecology field. Ecology is the study of the environment, living things in relation to the environment. So you want to take samples. You want to sample organisms on the field. In the ecosystem, you make use of ecological tools, sampling tools. So they are simply sampling tools. Quadrat is like a square. It could have a frame on a four-cornered frame, either made of wooden frame or metallic frame. Then there is a net inside of it. All right. And what the quadrat is used to is you throw it randomly for random sampling on the field. And it's basically used for organisms that are static or have very slow movement. Organisms that either they are static, they cannot move fast, they have slow movement. For example, plants. So if you want to know the types of the diversity, okay, the types of plants that are on the field, the sampling field, you want to know the types, the diversity, the variety of plants that are there, you can use this to take the sample. So once you throw the quadrants, then you can take the record of the types of plants. Maybe there's guinea grass, there's elephant grass, the grasses you have seen there. Then animals that are very slow in movement, for example, snails. All right, those are the kind of organisms that you use your quadrat to get. Your snails, your slug. Okay, but when you come to sweeping net is used for fast moving organisms and for animals or organisms that are on canopies. That means that are on top of trees. Okay, the sweeping net is a net that is designed, but it has an handy. You can use it to actually capture organisms, insects that are flying on the field to sample them. So quadrats used for plants, all right, and used for slowly moving organisms. All right, while this is used for fast moving organisms. So they can ask you to draw and they can ask you what they are used for. They are just sampling tools for the ecological study in biology. With this, I believe you have gotten a lot from today's class, and I believe they will help you in your examination. I wish you all the best in your exams. Please, if you have not subscribed to this channel, do well to hit the subscription button now and subscribe. If this video made sense to you, go to the comment section and type in value. Share this video with your friends, like it, and drop a comment. Thank you for being a part of today's class. I wish you success in your exams, and bye for now.